Folks, we need to talk about something pretty difficult, and I'm gonna need you guys to kind of lock in for a bit here, um, because we're kind of in deep shit. I think is the technical political science term. I think they teach that to you if you go to university for political science. That's one of the categories that they teach you when you get your doctorate in political science. Um, And that is basically, remember how I was talking about how we weren't quite at a constitutional, like the constitutional crisis. We are currently in it, but we haven't really seen it come to a head yet. Um, yeah, we're getting real fucking close to seeing it come to a head. And specifically what I'm talking about is this. The courts blocked Trump's federal funding freeze. Agencies are withholding money anyway. So basically, to give you guys a state of play here, Donald Trump tried via the Office of Budget Management to freeze like all the funding for all kinds of different branches of the federal government, all kinds of different agencies. And that was immediately challenged in court. And that in turn, led to an appeal that got struck down. So there is a temporary hold on them doing the freeze, meaning that money has to flow. Right? And that order came through last week on Friday. And maybe Thursday. All the days are kind of bleeding together now. However, ProPublica, as well as numerous other outlets, as well as just government employees, putting their jobs, if not their lives, on the line, have come forward and said, no, the funds are still frozen. ProPublica has this piece here published, several hours ago. The courts blocked Trump's federal funding freeze. Agencies are withholding money anyway. And, this includes kind of vital work, it includes, for example, this health clinic in Phoenix. For days, the pause had prevented her from accessing the money she needs for her Phoenix health clinic to serve thousands of at-risk people, most of them poor, and many of them members of the LGBTQ+ community. Things have gotten so bad that she had to lay off 3 employees and cut the salaries of her leadership team, including her own. Yeah. So when the funds started flowing again last week, days after the court orders, Leach hoped her ordeal would be over. It wasn't. Her federal dollars were accompanied by an ominous note from the payment processing arm of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, citing executive orders regarding potentially unallowable grant payments. The agency said it would continue taking additional measures to process payments and that its reviews will result in delays and/or rejections of payments. If it's not there, Leach said of the federal money that covers the salaries of 40% of her staff, things get really bad really fast. And that's kind of that's kind of like the general scenario for a incredibly massive swath of the United States at the moment. So we have this freeze that is in direct violation of court order, right? And that is, well, it's coming to a head, earlier today, the court basically came out and said, hey, you must restart these payments. You have to. It is not an option. This is not like, oh, well, but the president really, really, really wants the funding to go through, so it's going to go through. This is not an optional negotiation. Like I have, as a member of the judiciary with the authority to pause your processing and your plans, put a pause on it. You cannot continue. Okay? That being said, that has not, in fact, resulted in the payments restarting. Um, so this was particularly eye-opening from the piece talking about the judge issuing this ruling. Going forward, if Judge McConnell finds that the government is still ignoring his initial order, he could order more than a dozen administration officials named in the lawsuit to explain why they should not be held in contempt of court, and then punish them with imprisonment or, more likely, fines paid by their agencies, according to Adam Winkler, a professor at UCLA Law School. It's unlikely you can put the secretary of an agency in jail, he said, but you can. And I do think that this is basically where things are heading towards, because you can't you're gonna find an agency that is not like it's the thing it's doing is not funding things. How does that work? You know, like how are you like there's not really kind of an option there to do that, other than, for example, you find them and then you wait another week and then you find them again and then you wait another week and you find them again. But like, that doesn't matter. They don't care about the funding for the agencies, you know? So like, that's a pretty big problem. So it would seem to me that in light of the fact that this is a very imminent problem, like we have federal funding and federal grants that need to go out in order for vast federal agencies to function. So what happens, right? Well, if this judge has a spine, right, we start to see this showdown between the judiciary, and we start to see this kind of come to a head, you know? We start to see what happens when the judiciary and the presidency start smacking into each other. And at that point, the rubber kind of meets the road. Because if we do, in fact, have orders given to arrest multiple members of the administration, the question then becomes, who carries that out? And I genuinely have no idea. Like, we go into such a different kind of world that it kind of goes beyond what we can really speculate about. Does the military step in to start arresting people? Are we looking at military tribunals? Yeah, part of the I do agree, Paladin. Part of the goal here is that the businesses and agencies and workers who expected this money will fold, and then like the problem goes away. But I don't think that is. I think that while that is what they're banking on, I don't think that's what the outcome is going to be for them. So yeah. It's well, we're in some wacky times. But I don't see this going in a fine direction. Largely because you're finding an agency and there's no point in fining over financial machinations, right? Yeah, I mean, does it come down to US Marshals versus Capitol Police? Like, what happens? And I think a lot of what we'd see happen is like kind of a shoring up of different loyalties. But also, this isn't the kind of problem that is just going to sit on the table for days. You know, this isn't going to be a problem that goes into next week, because the issue of being paid is imminent, right? Like, the case of this clinic is kind of eye-opening. That's thousands of people that rely on those funds going through, and they're not getting those funds. Over the course of one weekend, they had to fire 3 employees just to make ends meet. Yeah, the FBI would normally take action. They're not going to do that. And yeah, that's kind of the thing, Ashley. The problem isn't going anywhere. It's just going to fester until something happens, because we're in the cool zone, you know? And at a certain point, like, well, the issue here, Uncle Tony, is that the judiciary has here drawn a line. We have a judge who is drawing a line here saying, you must do this. And so the issue here is that that line has already been drawn. And I don't know what happens. How will the nothing ever happens people explain all this? Genuinely no idea. What's really interesting to me is that I think, and a lot of people I've been reading to try and make sense of all of this have been talking about how the feeling right now among folks who have been paying attention is very similar to how folks were feeling right after the first cases of COVID were announced in the United States. And like people who read up on what COVID could do were freaking out, you know? But the vast majority of people in the country just kind of went along. You know, they didn't know what was going on. You know, it was just another day, and then another day, and then another day, and then suddenly shit started happening. So that is likely going to be kind of what happens here, is that a lot of people are going to be acting like it's just another day until suddenly it's not. And the reason that this is going to come to a head much sooner rather than much later is largely in the NIH. One of the things that has had its funding paused is the NIH. And the NIH, for those of you who don't know, basically keeps numerous states afloat. In multiple states, it is one of the largest, if not the largest employer in the entire state. Okay? If that NIH funding is frozen for any significant amount of time, and by this point it has been long enough where those those people on the ground are going to start to feel for it, if it is frozen for much longer, like we're talking Republican states start seeing their largest employer go under, you know? That's kind of the thing that and what I wanted to talk about here is, I know that doesn't seem necessarily like, oh, well, Republicans are going to feel it, but you know, they're not going to do anything about it. And yeah, NIH cuts billions of dollars in biomedical funding effective immediately. This is from 2 days ago. People are already feeling it 2 days later. It's destroying research on heart disease, on cancer, on all kinds of stuff. Matt Leck from the Majority Report. Hey, Sakatanuki.
It's the agency that experimented on the rats in that old Don Bluth movie.
Sakatanuki, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. But Matt Leck from the Majority Report here tweeted out this, and it's very accurate. If you want an idea of how bad this is all going to be very, very soon, worth looking up your area's research university and NIH funding to see how Musk/Trump's cuts will affect it. And this is the University of North Dakota's Department of Biomedical Sciences, first among similar departments to receive National Institutes of Health grants. And it turns out the Department of Biomedical Sciences, housed within UND's School of Medicine and Health Sciences, has been listed as the #1 recipient of National Institutes of Health grant dollars among comparable departments nationwide in fiscal year 2023, pulling in more NIH funding than similar departments at institutions such as Cornell University, at the University of Pennsylvania, and the University of Minnesota. UND is the only Midwestern university listed in the Blue Ridge Top 5, and this is going to tank so many jobs. Okay. Additionally, folks, I mean, like, it's hard to really overstate this, but this is from Jonathan Cohn here. Impact of NIH cut starting to sink in. Here's Senator Katie Britt. You'll remember her as the lady who looked like she was giving a hostage video speech for the RNC a few years back, urging a smart, targeted approach in order to protect important research at UA Birmingham, a top NIH recipient. Also, as article notes, the state's largest employer. So, Republicans are going to start feeling this hit sooner rather than later. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize as to why it is important to point out that Republicans are going to be feeling this sooner rather than later is specifically this recent polling from, I think it was The Independent? Who did this? Let me take a look here. Let's pull this up. Need to find it. Where are you at? I have so many tabs right now, guys. So many tabs. Don't even know. Here we go. Yes, this is from CBS News, YouGov poll. This is from February 5th through 7th. So this is the most recent polling we got, right? Now, a lot of this, very interesting data, but what's most interesting here is the spread of Republican voters here who, when asked, do you think Donald Trump's policies will make you financially better off, financially worse, or stay about the same? About 92% of Republicans currently think that they are either going to be better off or about the same financially. And there is absolutely no possible way they are going to be in either of those categories once the full effect of these funding freezes come into play. Okay, like there is a departure from reality for these people that is so severe, and they are slowly waking up to some of it. There's been polling coming out here about like pretty big shifts in approval of like Elon Musk being involved in government, for example, for Republicans in particular. But when the state's largest employer crashes, they know exactly who to blame for this. And it's not woke DEI, though I'm sure some Republicans are going to try and say it was woke DEI that crashed the state's largest employer. But this is on top of tariffs, the China tariffs. This is on top of new tariffs that just went into effect today on steel and something else I can't recall. But this is also, like, we still have the Canadian tariffs, we still have the Mexico tariffs, we still have the EU tariffs looming on aluminum. Thank you. So, the most immediate concern here is the federal funding freeze, and that is going to be felt imminently. The tariffs are going to be felt farther in the future. And it is, what's interesting here is that, again, we're in basically a zone, and there's a piece in the Washington Post here that I wanted to share with you guys. As the Trump upheaval continues, are there restraints that could slow him down? You know, an excellent question posed yesterday. And one of the top things in this article that you'll read as aging like milk here is, let's see. Okay, there are some checks and restraints left in the system, even if Congress abdicates its constitutional authority and responsibility to act as a check on the powers of the executive. One such check on this block will be the courts. Yeah. So, okay. So, if that is not, if the courts are not actually checking the president, well, that still leaves us with other ones, right? Another check could be on the markets. The president's move to impose and then delay tariffs on Mexico and Canada sent world markets gyrating with his oscillating policy. Consumer sentiment has begun to sour. Trump is a keen watcher of the stock indexes and will feel the effects if his tariff, tax, and spending policies lead to higher interest rates, higher prices, or slower growth. Of all the promises he made, a better economy with lower prices might be the one that resonated most broadly with voters. Finally, there is public opinion. And, guys, if the three things we are currently relying on here to stop the president is the court system, and the courts are not stopping him, and we're down to the markets and public opinion, that means we have a dictator, guys. Like, that's what that means. To parse that for you, those are the same constraints that dictators and kings work under. Okay? Like, those are not, like, that means we effectively do not have a constitution or rights or any of those things. Okay? So that's kind of where we're at. And, I was listening to, I've been listening to a number of kind of liberal podcasts to just kind of see, like, where are these people? Because a lot of them are saying that this is a crisis or that we're on the verge of a constitutional crisis. And, like, what are they saying? And a lot of them are just kind of coming down to, well, the courts. And when, I was listening to Fast Politics with Molly Zhang Fast, right? Who I generally, like her as a lib, but, she asked this former U.S. district attorney, like, what happens if Donald Trump ignores the courts? And the answer was just like, well, historically, he hasn't ignored, a ruling from the Supreme Court directly. So, like, then just kind of like a trail off. And that does not make me feel better. I got to be honest with you guys, that does not make me feel better. Could the midterms make a difference? Comrade Girl, yes. But I'm going to let you in on something. That requires on us making it to the midterms. That requires us to make that. And currently, that crisis is the crisis is worse than that. It is more imminent. Okay? Now, my rear end, I have seen a lot of people comparing this moment in time to Andrew Jackson ignoring the Supreme Court and doing the Trail of Tears. My one caveat and perhaps one ray of hope in that regard is that not enough, let me put it this way. Our enemies are morons. Our devils that have come to Earth to plague us have moved too swiftly. And that is a problem when you're trying to do something like, seize control over the military. And I can tell you this much, I don't know that I don't think that a lot of established members of the military are willing to go and send troops into battle for Pete Hegseth. And I do think that there are a number of people within the military who genuinely do value their oaths to the Constitution over the office of the president. So yeah, this is what we're talking about here is we're finally looking at like kind of an end game here, you know, which is that this current state of affairs, this tension that all of you are feeling from watching the news and absorbing this, cannot last. And eventually, eventually it's going to all break down. But one thing that I learned did make me feel a very tiny bit better about this current crisis we're in. And that is that apparently Steve Bannon has been urging Elon Musk to step in to start messing with the Pentagon's budget. And one of the things you need to know for that to make sense as to why it makes me feel better is largely that Steve Bannon fucking hates Elon Musk and wants him to die. That is like Steve Bannon hates Elon Musk a lot. And there is a not insignificant risk to Elon Musk if he starts mucking about with the military budget. Well, my hope is not Steve Bannon, Blueberry Bumblebee. My hope is that Steve Bannon's spiteful, petty, bigoted mindset is accurate in identifying that Elon Musk mucking about with the military budget would draw an absolute, fatal amount of ire from the military. This, by the way, is combined with another story that came out today that we need to talk about and is unfortunately incredibly important. It seems petty on the surface, but we do need to talk about it here. And I think it is right here. I have so many tabs open, guys. Forgive me if it takes a moment to bring stuff up. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. This is from popular.info, popular information by Judd Legum and Rebecca Crosby. So this is a new order that went out over the NSA today, which is basically, hey, NSA, delete all of your websites and internal network content that contains any of the 27 banned words that will operate within the NSA. What are these banned words, you might ask? They are anti-racism, racism, allyship, bias, DEI, diversity, diverse, confirmation bias, equity, equitableness, feminism, gender, gender identity, inclusion, inclusive, all-inclusive, inclusivity, injustice, intersectionality, prejudice, privilege, racial identity, sexuality, stereotypes, pronouns,
fucking pronouns,
transgender, and equality. Okay? Now, one thing you need to understand about why this is maybe kind of a big deal here is a lot of terminology inside of the NSA makes use of some of those words, like commonplace terms used within our spy networks include things like bias or confirmation bias. We're talking like the basic kind of spy rulebook shit. Is, you know, this is stuff that on the surface, guys, I want you to understand that, like, yes, it's bad that they are doing like a DEI purge. Yes, that is level 1. Level 2 is recognizing that a lot of these are components of the terminology that these spies use in order to describe their spying concepts. Another thing you need to understand is that the payment system that the DOGE services have been utilizing and mucking around with, well, that is what pays our spies. And another thing to just be aware of is that they've been threatening to out FBI agents, and through lax security, may have outed a bunch of our spies in the CIA and other agencies. And all I'm saying here is that I don't know any spies, but I imagine if one were to fuck with them, their security, the security of their families, and, their ability to be paid for their work that is incredibly dangerous, I would not personally do that. That is not something I think would, make my life long and, live out in full. Are these things bad? I mean, guys, if you fuck with thousands of spies, it's not that hard or that big of a reach to come to a conclusion that maybe they might try and take you out so that they can get their next paycheck. All right? Like, that's kind of where my head goes. So that's just another wrinkle in all of this. Like, there's a lot of fuckery around our defense agencies so far, but it's escalating. And you can only escalate with these people so far. Like, similarly, let me put it this way, guys. Let me maybe put it in a different way, all right? Maybe this will help you, okay? So, we all know Elon Musk has been in government now for, like, all of what? A week and a half? 2 weeks? Tops? This is how long it took for just normal people to get to this point. Presumably normal people who are not... 3 weeks. This is, it took 3 weeks for normal people who do not have, presumably, their paychecks dependent on the federal government and their security dependent on the federal government to reach this point. Yeah, just a casual Elon must die graffiti. That's how it took 3 weeks for normal people who have less on the line to reach this point. I think maybe there are other people who may be part of our national security apparatus who might be far closer to this point than a lot of us might realize. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Keep in mind, it's not that usual for someone to call for, this to happen. That's not super usual. Usually it's directed towards elected political figures or, queens who say, let them eat cake. Just usually it's something along those lines. So all I'm saying is we're kind of at the point where we're like half a step away here from finding out who in the government and where different parts of the government stand. Okay, that's kind of where I'm at here. You've got, of course, your loyalist agencies, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because someone at the top is loyal to Donald Trump doesn't mean the people who work there are loyal to Donald Trump, especially as you can see from a lot of the protesting workers who are going out there. We're in the cools. Are we going to hear something soon? I don't know. Like, genuinely, I'm just trying to describe to you guys where things currently sit so you understand, like, who all the players are, what all is happening here. I don't know what is going to happen. That's why it's called the cool zone. No one does. Okay? We don't know. Also, like, let's see here. We have more just general fuckery happening on a daily basis here. Trump's declaration allows Elon Musk to skirt open records laws. Basically, Donald Trump today declared that everything related to DOGE is now protected under the Presidential Records Act, so that you can't file a Freedom of Information Act request in order to see what they are doing. Which is pretty fucked, to say the least. Again, keep in mind, one thing that indicates how not powerful they are is that they have to do this, right? If they were powerful, they would not have to conceal to this extent what they are doing. Because they know that they are vulnerable, and so they have to take these actions. They are scared. Because again, they know that the majority of Americans right now are asleep. They're sleeping. They're afraid of that sleeping giant. Rightly. They are rightly afraid. Okay? And, I mean, like, so far, folks, here are the agencies, according to The Verge from earlier today, being targeted by Musk and, as the article says, his IT Renfields. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which they attempted to shut down today, the Department of Education, which they are going to attempt to shut down, the Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, General Services Administration, Department of Labor, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Office of Personnel Management, Small Business Administration, and the Treasury. Okay? These are not things you can really fuck with and have people be okay. There is going to be a cost to this that, like, will unfortunately wake people up with pain. It's not good. Yeah, like, do you really want to fuck with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration? Do you really want to do that? The organization that lets you know about incoming hurricanes? Okay. But one of the things I think we have to sit down and have, like, a hard talk about here is that, is reflected in this piece by Garrison Davis. This was amplified by, oh god, he does Behind the Bastards. Robert Evans tweeted this out, retweeted it. And I think it's, unfortunately, kind of where we're at. And it's from a Substack called Shatter Zone, titled How the Federal Government Fell. Government insiders give a timeline of catastrophe. The government of 2 weeks ago no longer exists. We are now in a fundamentally different country under the authority of President Trump. Elon Musk is leading a de facto cyber coup of the United States. Using the intentionally vague and unaccountable Department of Government Efficiency, Musk is seizing control of the United States' critical digital infrastructure, literally rewriting the code that runs our country and culling the federal workforce. Using the justification of removing government bureaucracy, Musk and Trump, Musk and the Trump administration have installed their own batch of bureaucratic tech oligarchs made up of former Tesla, SpaceX interns and engineers, Thiel Fellowship researchers, Palantir employees, eugenics enthusiasts, and Nick Fuentes pilled groypers. Career employees have been locked out of their respective agencies, both digitally and physically, as the DOGE team ransacks various departments and accesses wide swaths of sensitive government data. Agency officials who tried to resist Musk's seizure of classified materials have been fired, and more federal employees have been put on leave, including the entirety of U.S. aid. This effectively amounts to Musk abolishing the whole department, all without congressional authorization or oversight. Not even an executive order from Trump that exceeds presidential authority. On a whim, the unelected Elon Musk decided to carry out the closure of a government agency. He is far from finished. DOGE has hijacked the Treasury to withhold authorized payments to multiple agencies. Okay? Elon Musk has personally directed the General Services Administration to terminate leases on mostly empty federal buildings. The GSA, essentially the landlords of the federal government, was one of the first agencies to receive Musk's fork-in-the-road deferred resignation letter, offering to buy out the entire workforce. The legality of the letter is uncertain, as it promises to pay out currently unappropriated funds, which basically means that if you take this letter, you are a fool, and they are not going to pay you. Okay, Donald Trump has a history of not paying people. They're not going to pay you if you take this offer. All right? IRS workers who accepted the resignation offer have already been asked to return to work until May. So, there you go. The newly appointed GSA commissioner, Michael Peters, a private equity executive that specializes in downsizing corporate real estate, has decided that non-DOD federal building spaces should be reduced 50%, according to a GSA employee who requested to remain anonymous. On top of planning to cut the entire federal portfolio by half, DOGE is seeking to cut GSA's own budget by as much as 50%, with talk of consolidating GSA offices to a few major cities using a hub model. Patrick Lucas, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. I really, really do appreciate it. I am going to pause this so that it doesn't do a string of these, but I do appreciate it. Thank you very, very much for supporting the show. GSA offices to a few major cities using a hub model. Wired reports that DOGE staff may be trying to use White House IT credentials to gain access to GSA computers remotely. An anonymous GSA employee claims that few people at the agency have elected to take up the voluntary paid resignation offer, with those who have mostly being of retirement age. High-level Trump appointees used scare tactics in agency emails, pressuring career employees to accept the deferred resignation offer, warning that cost-cutting measures will eventually lead to a further reduction in force. Employees are concerned that a reduced workforce would result in federal buildings losing their operations and maintenance contracts, with disastrous consequences for functionality of government buildings. The brain drain is going to cripple our ability to maintain the buildings even more than it already was. We aren't overstaffed, per a GSA employee. I think this process is already too far along to stop, adding, I'm hoping we just need to get to the midterms. And, guys, considering the timeline we are currently on, we don't have until midterms. What is happening across the federal government right now is unprecedented, but this is not Germany in the 1930s. It is not the fall of the Soviet Union. We grasp at analogies to help contextualize current events that escape understanding. There are similarities, but what's happening is new, very American, and very 21st century. In 50 years, it will be talked about in the vein of what happened to the United States in the mid-2020s. Rhetoric of cutting red tape and breaking federal bureaucracy has been common political claptrap for decades, and previous efforts have largely all been bark but no bite. But now there's been a huge chomp, so why now? Trump has blamed entrenched federal bureaucracy or the deep state for preventing him from enacting sweeping change during his first term. The obstacles Trump encountered didn't just come from Congress and the courts, but rank-and-file government workers who ran the day-to-day operations. Last month, the far-right America First Policy Institute published a report titled Tales from the Swamp: How Federal Bureaucrats Resisted President Trump. The author, James Shirk, a former Heritage Fellow, credits hostile career employees for refusing to implement policies. Many career employees refused or defied directives, withheld information, slow-walked projects they opposed, performed unacceptably, and used strategic leaking to undermine the president's agenda, writes Shirk. Trump himself realized this late into his first term and sought to remedy the problem by revoking civil protections for tens of thousands of federal career employees, reclassifying them as at-will employees under an executive order called Schedule F. This allowed Trump to treat large swaths of federal employees as political appointments. In his article for AFPI, Shirk refers to career removal protections as a modern invention that protects entrenched bureaucracy. One of the big things here is that there has been a protracted political campaign and propaganda effort here in order to demonize federal workers, okay? Much like you'll see in like white supremacist websites like the Daily Stormer that just run constant articles about how black people do crimes, right? Much like you see that, in conservative circles, they are seeing constant stories of federal bureaucrats being evil, being the people who are, opposing Donald Trump effectively. They are the regime. You may have seen some conservatives tweeting about the regime yesterday during the Super Bowl. People were like, "Oh, yes, this halftime show is part of the regime." It's literally just anything they don't like is the deep state, and it's being done by bureaucrats that they don't like, that are trying to make your life worse, okay? It is an insane alternative reality that they live in, okay? Okay. So, here we go. Trump has fully embraced the unitary executive theory proposed by the likes of Russell Vought, Project 2025 co-author and newly confirmed director of the White House Office of Management and Budget. Although it's understood that Congress has power of the purse, under unitary executive theory, Trump now believes the funding appropriated by Congress does not need to be spent. Rather, the executive branch controls the flow of federal spending, and Congress merely sets a ceiling on spending that the executive must not exceed. Which, I need to be very, very clear, is not how our Constitution works. It is not how our powers are arranged. This has never, ever been the case. This is in breach of the Constitution, and honestly, it is grounds for removal of the president. So, that is, in a just society, he would be removed from power on this alone. All right? Under this interpretation of the Constitution, the president has sole and complete control of the executive branch, including all its agencies and departments. But others, like J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, could be pushing Trump to go even further, to where the president considers both the judicial and legislative branches purely ceremonial and advisory, in the words of New Right philosopher Curtis Yarvin. And arguably, we are already well on our way to that point. This centralized executive power allows the executive branch to achieve goals I would have previously considered quite lofty. I'll outline two examples pulling from the aspirations of the modern conservative movement. And so, before we go on through this, essentially, they are trying to say, with their philosophy and now with their actions, because again, J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, has been calling on Donald Trump to ignore the rule of law, ignore the courts, and continue to do what he's doing. And that is why we are going to be hitting in rapid order, like maybe tomorrow, maybe Wednesday, not exactly sure. But we're going to be hitting a point where, like, essentially, we're going to see where the rubber meets the road. We're going to see if they have actually consolidated enough power to complete this coup, to, crown Trump as a king. Okay? Or a tyrant. I don't know about you guys, but I don't bow to tyrants. Where can I find this article? I'll link it in chat right now. Before we continue on, because I do think that this is kind of very critical reading here for the time we're in. So the article goes on, and we're not going to read it word for word, the entire thing, but basically the two examples given in this article are the FBI being defanged and the Department of Education being on the chopping block. Okay. So I think we need to take a look here. Okay. Then it gives a timeline of Elon Musk's involvement and the speed at which all of this is happening. So let's talk about this a little bit. In doing this, Musk is following the tech industry motto, move fast and break things. So far, all his actions bypass Congress, the slow controller of stable government. Having everything be done via executive order and DOGE helps to speedrun a full reboot of the administrative state. The motto of the old federal government may as well be move slow and build things. Progress is slow, but detonation is fast. The breakage of the government isn't a mere side effect or bug of this expedited form of rule, it's a feature. To reshape the government into their ideal technocracy, first breaking things is a requirement. They might not get away with all of it, and they don't need to. They are doing so much so fast, knowing they will only get away with some of it. But with new Supreme Court approved presidential immunity and unlimited pardon power, they can try as much as they want with zero consequence. These are not the moves you would make if you wanted a stable government. It's the moves you would make as a new tech company, which is why Musk's operation is masked with Silicon Valley language of efficiency. The inefficiencies of government are part of the point. That's what creates stability, makes a country a trusted ally, and gives the dollar value. Regulations can be bothersome sometimes and downright problematic, but that's kind of the point. They act as a control on imprecise and rushed decision-making. If the cost of doing business is slowing down the process, that's the cost that has to be made. To quote a government employee who spoke on the condition of anonymity. But those inefficiencies and pesky regulations really irritate the Silicon Valley tech bros who think they are the smartest people on the planet. It's their view that since they're so smart, shouldn't they run the country? Musk has a personal interest in slashing the regulatory state as it interferes with his own businesses and dream of space colonization. Last year, Musk claimed that DOGE was the only path to extending life beyond Earth. The White House press secretary said that Musk himself will determine when there is a conflict of interest involving his business and DOGE. SpaceX alone received $15.4 billion in government contracts, according to the New York Times. Yeah. Then it goes on to explain Curtis Yarvin's idea of a butterfly revolution, essentially purge bureaucracy, nullify elite institutions of power, co-opt Congress, and ignore the courts. And here we get to this. The real roadblock is the courts. The Trump administration has repeatedly displayed a willingness to ignore the courts based on the continuing halting of federal spending and grants, despite an order from the U.S. District Judge. The Justice Department argued that the order to resume funding contains several ambiguous terms and provisions that could be read to constitute significant intrusions on the executive branch's lawful authorities and the separation of powers. This past weekend, Musk raged against a federal judge who ordered to temporarily restrict DOGE's access to Treasury data. Both Musk and the White House have labeled the judge an activist, with White House spokesperson Harrison Fields calling the order absurd and judicial overreach. On X, the Everything app, Musk boosted claims calling this a judicial coup, and an announcement from California Representative Darrell Issa to introduce legislation to stop these rogue judges. Even without added legislation, Musk and the Trump administration are gearing up to directly defy judicial authority, which, yes, they have now done that, by the way. This all came out before they did that. On Saturday, Musk shared a tweet reading, "I don't like the precedent it sets when you defy a judicial ruling, but I'm just wondering what other options are these judges leaving us if they're going to blatantly disregard the Constitution for their own partisan political goals." On Sunday, JD Vance posted a statement undermining judicial power, which is kind of the turning point where it was like, oh shit. They want to throw the shit in the fan as fast as possible. Okay? Now it all comes down to force. If the executive branch not just ignores judicial authority but blatantly defies it, who would be left to enforce the power of the court? And that kind of brings us to the essential reading of where we're at. This is kind of where we're at right now. Centralize the police. Nationalize local law enforcement to place them under federal control. Trump has flirted with this tactic when he deputized Washington police as U.S. Marshals to kill Michael Reinl. DOGE staff threatened to call U.S. Marshals when USAID security officials, who have since been fired, denied them access to classified systems. Yarvin believes this step is paramount. Support of the Democratic public is a cipher. And I think that actually all you need is command of the police. If you have all the guys with guns, who can physically stop you? Support from the public doesn't hurt, though. And if things get tricky, Trump could mobilize populist support. But don't wait until you are at your weakest at the end of your term after losing the election. Under popular mandate, deploy your empowered supporters at the height of your power to oppose any obstruction from government agencies or the courts. Trump may weaponize Supreme Court ordained presidential immunity and his unrestricted pardon power to make any willing actor carry out his bidding with zero risk of legal consequence, which is essentially legitimizing, in the eyes of the presidency and the state, militias. We are currently right here. You know, we're currently up here, but these are kind of the last two steps here. Even if Trump himself isn't aware of this plan, his vice president certainly is. On a far-right podcast in 2021, JD Vance laid out a very similar vision for a second Trump term, using what the Peter Thiel protege described as a de-wokification program to purge bureaucracy. Quote, "I think Trump is going to run again in 2024. I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people." That's basically Project 2025 in a nutshell, folks. The future vice president continued, "And when the courts stop you, stand before the country and say, the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it," which is, again, the Andrew Jackson thing. Yarvin writes that the initial goal of the new administration should not be to simply govern, but to figure out what the Trump administration can actually do when it assumes the full constitutional powers given to the chief executive of the executive branch. Now, I'm going to pause right here and say one thing that I think we may have going for us, and this is just us kind of coming back to like, what are the actual material things going on here, is that our enemies are some of the dumbest motherfuckers. Okay? They may have smart people around them, but thankfully, they themselves are dumb motherfuckers. So, it may be that this rush towards power that they are trying to do, they are going to overstep in a way that they are not going to be able to come back from. Like, they're going to open the Pandora's box that leads to their own destruction, we'll say. Yeah, if they were Shell Bell, if they were smart, they would be doing this a lot slower. At the very least, they would be kind of culminating it right before the tax cuts get passed. But the entire clown car is being driven by Elon Musk, who is, again, according to people who work with him and insiders, one of the dumbest motherfuckers. Okay? And we're gonna get to some of the ways in which this entire effort is not great, but I do really, really want to emphasize here that the times we are in are severely fucked. And I don't know that there's going to be a de-escalation from where we're at right now. So, with clear eyes, we got to go forward with this knowledge, okay? Let's continue on. What the administration can do once they fully seize this power is so incredibly vast. Without checks and balances, all those crazy things Trump tried to do in his first term would be a lot easier to enact, let alone whatever Musk and the tech oligarchs want out of the United States Incorporated. Which, by the way, Elon Musk has a literal company called America Inc., or nonprofit called America Incorporated. So that's fun. But this is a whole separate topic. The current fight determines the degree to which this power is seized. Yarvin notes the importance of going all the way. Trump in 2017 took office. He took about 0.01% of power. If Trump in 2021 wants to have more than 0.001% of power, the only way he can do it is to take 100%, to take it all at once completely legally. The real Donald J. Trump would never have the guts to even think of doing this, and he's just too old. So that's good, I think. Maybe. Marginally. All of this doesn't even need to benefit Trump supporters, because Trump's main campaign promise wasn't mass deportation, fixing the economy, or abolishing the Department of Education. It was retribution. As extremism analyst Jared Holt notes, the right got its base so hooked on the idea of revenge, it doesn't even have to pretend any of this benefits their base in any tangible way. They just have to say it hurts the wrong people and it satisfies them. If Trump and Musk continue to get their way, it could take years to fix. But the past 10 years have shown us you can't return to normal. There probably is no going back. The options are to hunker down and play it slow and try to survive whatever happens in the next 2 to 4 years while offering passive resistance, or to accelerate to whatever comes next, put cards on the table, trigger a kinetic confrontation, and fully manifest the results of this constitutional crisis. We're dealing with managing crumbles versus full systems collapse. Sad face emoji. And I do think that that's kind of where we're at right now. That's kind of where we're at right now. That's not at all scary. Yeah, one of the explanations of the kind of situation we, all of you here, and myself included, find ourselves in, is that, it's like staring down a hurricane. You know, you have to like hunker down and deal with what is coming. You know? Yeah, here you go, Real Ranham. So, keep in mind, again, that the United States is not exceptional, right? What has happened here in the United States and what is currently happening here in the United States has been done and has happened in many countries around the world. And life goes on. Okay? This is something to understand. That despite crisis occurring, life goes on. Now, what could happen, I will say it right off the bat, if we are looking into a future that is full of more violent conflict, then the most likely outcome is not a full-blown civil war. What is more likely would be small acts of violence, assassination, maybe, or attempts. What we see is likely more sporadic than a full out, knockdown, drag-out fight. Skirmishes, perhaps. But again, much more likely targeted violence. I would... My assumption, and again, I don't think anyone knows how things are going to shake out because no one has a complete picture of what is currently happening in Washington, D.C. I imagine there's going to be targeted violence. That is probably the most likely outcome. A full-blown collapse of the American state into, like, different factions, into, like, a civil war scenario, not as likely. It's not off the table, but it's not as likely. Real Rad Hum, I second that recommendation. Folks should go listen to the opening season of It Could Happen Here. And it is a very good look at what can happen. Okay?
It's scary, but I'm not giving up.
Good.
Clear liberation, white flag, rainbow, raised fist.
Good. You shouldn't give up. None of this, by the way, is trying to tell you it's time to give up. None of this is that. In order for us to start trying to fix a problem, we need to understand the scope and scale of it. We need to understand what the problem even is. Okay? Skunky Nugs, that's almost certainly what they're planning to do, yes. Now, I will say that it is somewhat heartening, though too little too late, to see the New York Times posting opinion pieces like this. Apparently, they're trying to do a leftward swing now. They're just trying to, like, be the contrarian in the room. And folks, let me just tell you one thing. Everyone hates the contrarian. Everyone hates someone who just exists to be the devil, you know? The devil's advocate. No one likes that person. Okay? Don't be that in social situations, and probably don't be that as a newspaper. Okay? But I will say, again, we need to take a look at something here. Right? And that is, one of the points that has been made here is that these people are not as strong as they seem. Because one of the things a lot of people kind of miss when they're like, oh, Elon Musk is worth $400 bajillion, is that Elon Musk may be worth that, but he doesn't have that. You know? He owns things that in aggregate have a value placed on them of $400 billion, right? The second there is a hole in the global financial system, the wealth that he has, the wealth that every wealthy person on Earth has, suddenly means exactly jack shit. Okay? And part of the issue here is that Elon Musk in particular is very much poor as shit. Because, guys, he's been spending money at a crazy rate, which means he's also been taking on loans at a crazy rate. Okay? Dude owes a lot of money. A lot of money. And kind of his gamble right now is that he's going to make this whole cooing America thing pay off for him in a way that he won't have to worry about those debts anymore. Okay? There is one problem with that, however. And that is very specifically this next part of the story that folks might not be immediately apparent to folks.
Need can burn in hell. They're hooked on how trans people are unfortunate targets of the Trump admin sent me over the edge.
Oh yeah, I thought about talking about that today, Andrew S., but I don't have, this is about as much as I can handle. I don't got that in me today. Don't got that fight for that at the moment. But this is maybe one of the more interesting stories that came out yesterday from Reuters. Trump says U.S. may have less debt than thought because of fraud, which is an odd headline to see. You know, what does that mean? Right? What does this mean? Okay, let's take a look. U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday said his administration was examining U.S. Treasury debt payments for possible fraud and suggested that the country's $36 trillion debt load might not be that high. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump said administration officials who've been combing through payment records in an effort to identify wasteful spending have turned their attention to the debt payments that play a central role in the global financial system. We're even looking at treasuries, Trump said. There could be a problem. You've been reading about that with treasuries, and that could be an interesting problem. He added, it could be that a lot of those things don't count. In other words, that some of that stuff that we're finding is very fraudulent. Therefore, maybe we have less debt than we thought. Now, folks are a little hazy on what he means here, but the most common interpretation here when he's talking about the treasuries, okay, is that he's talking about treasury bonds. The bonds of debt that people can buy debt, you know, and then the U.S. government pays it back. Like with a little bit extra. It is considered one of the most stable forms of investment and safe forms of investment in the world. It is one of the reasons why the world uses the US dollar. If he's talking about that, and he's saying, we're just not going to honor treasury bonds, we're talking like the utter decimation of the global financial markets. Not just America, but like the world. This is the kind of collapse that, like, instantaneously we see violence in the streets, you know? Like, that's the kind of collapse we're talking about. So, the White House has tried to walk back his statements. But that's what he's talking about yesterday. So, the danger we're in here, folks, is that our enemies are very stupid, but they do have access to power. But the issue is that they're so stupid, they might just use that power in a way that would, like, just ruins the world. Why did we blow up the world? I don't know. Some asshole pushed a button. No, that's the thing, GamerG. No one understands the danger we are all in. You know, no one does. Like, people are starting to kind of understand. Remember at the beginning of this conversation when I said, like, a lot of people are just kind of, like, asleep They don't really understand. It's kind of like when we were in, like, COVID was here, but, like, people weren't really aware of it and didn't really treat it like it was really anything. And then suddenly there were morgues in the streets. So, yeah, that's it's really bad. There's really no sugarcoating this. Now, there was a piece here that kind of resonated with me, and I wanted to bring that up. Just kind of emblematic of where we're in, the times we're in, anyway. Let's see if I can pull this up. Oh, just real quick while I'm looking this up. Yeah, just in case you're wondering, if axing all of the regulations in the United States right now is a great move, considering we are, even with regulations, one of the only countries that feeds actual bird shit to cows. In light of the, the bird flu that is currently running rampant through our cattle. Yeah, maybe not great. Like maybe the times we're in here when it comes to, any aspect of our society, we shouldn't be letting these people anywhere near it. Okay. Yeah, actually, this was a good observation relating to financial markets from Paul Krugman. For those not familiar with how financial markets work, U.S. Treasuries are the ultimate safe asset used for collateral for everything. Even a hint that some treasuries might not be honored could bring everything to a screeching halt. Musk and Trump both have a habit of stiffing people they owe money. If markets even suspect that this habit will extend to treasuries, God help us. And that's, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We got the people who know anything about any one of these problems are like, oh shit, if this goes, we're all cooked. That's where we're at. So that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to read this off here. Yeah, here we go. This is from George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia, and I think you might all understand why I'm reading it off here. This quote. The industrial towns were far away, a smudge of smoke and misery hidden by the curve of the Earth's surface. Down here it was still the England I had known in my childhood, the railway cuttings smothered in deep wildflowers, the deep meadows where the great shining horses browse and meditate, the slow-moving streams bordered by willows, the great bosom of the elms, the larkspurs in the cottage gardens, and then the huge, peaceful wilderness of outer London, the barges on the miry river, the familiar streets, the posters telling of cricket matches and royal weddings, the men in bowler hats, the pigeons in Trafalgar Square, the red buses, the blue policemen, all sleeping the deep, deep sleep of England, from which I sometimes fear that we shall never wake till we are jerked out of it by the roar of bombs. And that is kind of where I'm at right now. Like, that's kind of the apocalyptic scenario staring down on us. That's from George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia. Okay. Trying to understand it, even though I've tried to research about it, I still don't understand why Trump and his people do all of this crazy stuff. Well, for a couple of reasons. One, because we have a mechanism within capitalism called, or a mode of capitalism called disaster capitalism, which is essentially you wait for a natural disaster of some kind. And once the fire goes through or the hurricane blows through, you as a rich person can swing in, buy everything for a song, and then rebuild it for, rich, wealthy folks. It's effectively a way of clearing people out of an area, and then you get prime real estate for next to nothing. It's the same reason why Donald Trump today, and we'll get into this, talked about how he was going to personally own Gaza. That is what he intimated in his statements about Gaza. Almost like a Belgian Congo situation. So that's one aspect, right? One aspect is you can swing in, buy everything for a song, and then after everything's rebuilt, you make a ton of money, right? The other reason, and this is maybe a even more sinister reason, is that by breaking aspects of the government, things that millions upon millions of people rely on, you can effectively create your own disaster. You manufacture a disaster on a scale previously unthinkable, and then you can swing in, if you are someone with hundreds of billions of dollars, you can swing in and buy up a country and rebuild it however you'd like. That's what you can do when you have that amount of power. And a lot of these people, a lot of these 100 billionaires, they believe that they are the smartest people to ever exist because they've been told their entire lives by surrounding sycophants that they are the smartest, most special boy. And they believe that they can make their own Bioshock Rapture civilization, but it'll work well this time because they're so smart and so rich and so powerful. That they can build the Tower of Babel and reach God. That's kind of their hubris here is all too real. And this is born out of the fascist philosophy of like Curtis Yarvin, of Balaji Srinivasan. These are people we've talked about before on the show. You can read, for example, The Network State, which is by Balaji Srinivasan, which is basically about how on a small scale one could buy either a corrupt government or just land outright and build a small, independent, libertarian, fascist city. But this idea goes far beyond that. The Greenland project, by the way, that you've been hearing about from Peter Thiel, he wants to buy. He's the one who's pushing for Greenland to get purchased. That is born entirely out of Balaji Srinivasan's ideas of building like a tech city utopia. And we can talk more about that in another segment. But yeah, basically it's all just fascist circle jerking by these people. Archangel the Cobb, thank you for subscribing. Sounds like the plot of Deus Ex. Yeah, I mean, if you've ever played any kind of dystopian future ruled by oligarchs and like AI overlords and stuff like that, yeah, that's basically what they want. They aspire to that. They think it'll be rad. Like, Elon Musk has literally gone on record talking about how he loves the universe of Blade Runner. You know, Blade Runner, the movie about being miserable in like a world where robotic slaves are used. the movie about, slave catchers. That movie, he saw that and thought it was aspirational. God. So yeah, we are in a crisis, and there's only really so many ways to say that we're in a crisis. Here's Chris Murphy on I think This Week on ABC.
You have the court process working. A judge has now barred Elon Musk teams from the Treasury database. They have blocked Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. So why not just let the system work?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're not sure it's working right now. I continue to get reports from Connecticut that agencies there, like Head Start programs and community health centers, are actually not receiving the funding that they are due. So I think there's a big question as to whether the administration actually is implementing the court order, and the pace of this assault on the Constitution in order to serve the billionaire class. It is absolutely dizzying. And so you have to run a full-scale opposition. You can't just rely on the courts. Ultimately, you've got to bring the American public into this conversation, because we need our Republican colleagues in the House and in the Senate ultimately to put a stop to this. You cannot just rely on the court system when the challenge...
You have the...
Like, we are like when a senator says we can't just rely on the court system, like, I know that what he's saying is we have to organize people to, like, protest and stuff, but, like, we're kind of going beyond a point where, like, public protest on its own will influence these outcomes, you know? Like, we're rapidly approaching that point. I'm not sure if we're quite there, but we are blazing towards that point. Yeah, shit's bad. There's a reason why the name of this show is The United States is Sleepwalking Towards the Cliff Edge of Chaos, because most of us aren't aware of it. You know? Most of the people in the United States have no idea. Or they only have, like, a one piece of the puzzle, you know? People don't like Trump, people don't like Musk, but, like, that's not enough to stop them. I do agree that if we do want to stop them, this take is something that I think is very necessary. Something incredibly important everyone impacted can do. To the maximum extent possible, treat these rulings as having the full weight of law. I realize that's not possible in every instance, but what they are doing is plainly illegal and fascist. And that's kind of where we're at. Like, people need to stop saying yes to these dictators, to these fascists coming to their door. People need to stop taking the buyout offers. People need to stop saying, "Well, but they're making me feel bad, so I took the buyout offer." Don't do that. If you're a federal worker, you need to stay.
We must stand together and make them cower.
It's true. They need to know that, like, oh yeah, you'll stay. They gotta work to fire you. Because fuck them, that's why. All right? We need to, like, replace this attitude of, oh man, but they aren't appreciating my work anymore, with, fuck you, I'm gonna go to work. Fuck you. I'm gonna do this work poorly, but not so poorly that you can fire me. Fuck you. You know, we need to have that energy. We need to request that energy from, like, our federal workforce. Okay? Oh, what? You're coming in here? Do you have a warrant from a judge? No? Come back when you get a warrant. Fuck you. I don't think you have the constitutional or judicial or legal authority to come in here and request that of me. Come back with a warrant. You know, genuinely. That's the kind of energy. We need the fuck you make me energy. We need to, as much as possible, redirect their inquiries to courts of law. If, that is, by the way, if the courts of law even hold, which, who knows? Who knows? But if this does turn into, like, Trump administrator officials, secretaries of different departments being arrested or getting warrants issued for their arrest, and Donald Trump summarily just pardons them, I think what we're going to see is we're gonna see like a military start taking action, you know? Like there's a need for checks and balances. An oath was taken to the Constitution, not to the president. And like at a certain point, like the entire process that we have built up in our government and in our society is one that is supposed to facilitate the peaceful transfer of power and the peaceful, maintenance of power. And in the absence of those systems, when those systems are destroyed, when those systems are undermined, what is left but the politics of the gun? You know? That's kind of if we're going to baseline it here, it's the politics of the rock. And we're barreling towards a time where we're going to find out who has the bigger rock. Will it be Krug or will it be Ugg? Who knows? Guess it'll be, in an academic sense, interesting to see. Yes, all of this is hypothetical. Finally, The Rock has come back. Oh, yeah! The people's elbow! Ha! Yeah, exactly. You got it. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson wasn't gonna run for politics, he was gonna elbow into politics! What is the mechanisms for enforcement if the badge is in their control? It's The Rock. The politics of The Rock. They're like where we are right now is already beyond the borders of what we have mechanisms for. If they continue to let me put it this way. We're right on the map's edge of what we have mechanisms for. The court has said to Donald Trump and his cronies, you must make the money flow. If you do not, then we're going to start either putting fines on departments or arresting secretaries of these different departments. It makes no sense to fine a department when their crime is not paying people. So then we see arrests, or at least the court orders arrests. At that point, we see what happens. Do the marshals comply with the court, or do they do nothing? And at that point, if they do nothing, we're in a constitutional crisis. So we are literally like right there. There is one opportunity left for, Donald Trump to back down, to back away from this horrific outcome. And there are no indications whatsoever that they are going to do so.